It's an ambush.
Oh my God, it's an ambush!
It's an ambush!
Of course!
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to an ambush stream. Yes, that's what we call it, an ambush stream. A stream I didn't even really plan on doing, except that, the stars kind of aligned, and I had a little free time before work would visit itself upon me again, or other obligations, and so I thought I'd do a little follow-up to Sunday's show, because as I sort of mentioned yesterday when I read an article about Kamala Harris, there have been several articles coming out in the last few days that sound very worried, that express a level of concern I don't know that I've seen from the major outlets in recent weeks. But here we are. We're coming into the final weeks ahead of the 2024 presidential election, and people still don't know what exactly is Kamala Harris going to do. What kind of candidate is she? What kind of president would she be if she wins? Which is still a decent likelihood. And so I thought I'd go through some of these recent articles, just for my own edification and perhaps yours. But whose edification would I be supplementing aside from myself this morning? Why, that would be JB. Good morning. Kiro Soldier. Good morning. Full Metal Joker, also known as Full Metal Joker. Good morning. The Best Remy. Good morning. Jaeger Pony. Good morning to you. Fun Time Bats. Good morning. Who else is here? Mike Savage. Blarg. Robert Pincus. Good morning. Unfair Ophelia. Good morning to you. Senior staff reporter and chief Florida correspondent Colleen Bernier. Because every day has a yay with Colleen Bernier. Good morning, Colleen. Tack Alpaca. Good morning. Jim Heelis. Good morning to you. The Blakester. Good morning. Daryl Odell. Good morning to you. And I think I got one more here. John Miller. Good morning. And to anybody that I missed, anybody lurking, anybody in the future, good morning. All right, so let's take a look at a story from just yesterday out of CNN. We got a couple of CNNs here. But I've got CNN, MSNBC, Time Magazine, and then another CNN. So these aren't fringe publications or anything. Of course, they might be making themselves more so as time goes on. But anyway, as Harris makes case for presidency, her record as prosecutor draws fresh scrutiny. Yeah, we don't hear much about her record as prosecutor. In fact, her previous experience in a lot of these articles I read barely mention her political career prior to becoming vice president. Certainly, they rarely mention her presidential campaign originally, and her prosecutorial experience only sometimes comes up. When Kamala Harris famously refused to seek the death penalty against a young gang member accused of killing a cop 2 decades ago, she said then that her opposition to capital punishment was well-reasoned and absolute. Even under pressure from the late Democratic Senator Dianne Feinstein, who received a standing ovation when she called for the death penalty at the officer's funeral, Harris, then 39, stood strong. Quote, "For those who want this defendant put to death, let me say simply that there can be no exception to principle," unquote. She wrote in an opinion piece published in the San Francisco Chronicle in 2004, shortly after being elected the city's first female district attorney. Well, just for reference's sake, I, too, do not think that the death penalty should be a thing. I have my own reasons for that. I can go into them if you want me to. I did a video on it at one point several years ago. So at least on that side of things, I agree with her, I suppose. I'd have to know what her arguments are. Quote, "I gave my word to the people of San Francisco that I oppose the death penalty," Harris wrote, quote, "and I will honor that commitment despite the strong emotions evoked by this case," unquote. Okay. Just 4 years later, however, Harris pushed aside her long-held opposition to capital punishment when she announced plans to run for Attorney General of California. She vowed that, if elected, she would, quote, "enforce the death penalty as the law dictates." Okay. Well, I mean, if it is the law, then she would be required to do so. So, I guess that doesn't technically mean she's changing her personal opinion on it, but she's doing her job. So, okay. So far, I'm not seeing what the problem is. As Attorney General of California, she advocated for enforcement of a state law under which the parents of chronically truant kids could be thrown in jail. But years later, during her first campaign for president, she expressed regret that some prosecutors had actually done so, saying that was, quote, never the intention, unquote, of the law. Okay. Her shifting stance on the contentious topic is but one example of how the Democratic presidential nominee has attempted to walk the line between tough-on-crime prosecutor and progressive politician. She can't change the laws as prosecutor. I don't know. I might have to be a little softer on her for this one. It's like, well, her personal opinions and what she would do if she were in charge is one thing. What she's bound to by the law is the other. Following the controversial police killing of Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri, you mean the act of self-defense by a police officer against an aggressive combatant trying to take his gun from him? CNN, the time has passed. You frame it like it was some sort of unlawful execution. Stop it. The controversial police killing of Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri in 2014, Harris launched a pilot program requiring field special agents of the California Department of Justice to begin wearing body cameras. She declined, however, to back a far more comprehensive measure favored by police reform advocates that would have provided statewide regulations on the devices. Okay, well, bit by bit, day by day. Honestly, at this point, I don't see that she wasn't trying to do things methodically. About 6 years later, following the police murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis, the police murder of George Floyd, Harris noted the importance of independent investigations into alleged police misconduct, citing the inherent problem of perceived or real conflicts of interest when such cases are investigated by local prosecutors. As California's AG, however, she declined to provide that sort of outside scrutiny to several controversial police shootings in the state. Okay, now we're getting into hypocrisy. Kiro Soldier, thank you so much. Have to head to the floor, pardon me. Later, Scribe. Later, Kiro Soldier. Have a good day at work on the floor. This will be here for you when you get back. Thanks so much. Okay. Her critics have seized on these and other perceived contradictions as evidence that she's a flip-flopping politician, a chameleon, as Republican vice presidential nominee Senator J.D. Vance has repeatedly called her. Well, I don't know if some of these examples in her prosecutorial history are as on point as other things, like the border, for example, as she gets very contentious about. Like I say, her personal opinion about, let's say, death penalty is aside the point if she has to enforce the laws of the state. Now, if she has discretion that she goes against these things and then things go sideways, anyway. But Harris's supporters see her as an open-minded leader, unafraid to change her thinking when persuaded by evidence. Yeah, I don't know if it's so much evidence as political expedience. She'll say or do whatever she needs to do to get the approval at the time. Most of the time, it seems like. Her thinking on the border. What changed? Right, she can't, and we talked about this yesterday, she can't admit to failings or faults in the Biden administration up to this point, but she's happy to back changes on border policy that are completely countermanded by her previous statements about border policy. She won't say why, because that would indicate that there was a problem that they're attempting to resolve, a problem with their own policies. You can be both things. You could have been a prosecutor who had her own opinions but was also bound by the law. You could also be a fair-weather friend to any particular issue if you think it's going to get you an edge in your political aspirations. These two things can be true at the same time. Brendan Woods, who currently serves as the top public defender in Oakland, California, where Harris got her start as a prosecutor, said he has closely watched her career, both as a prosecutor and as a politician, and seen her change course on issues that matter to him. Quote, "I think people can evolve," Woods told CNN, "and I think that's what she's done," unquote. Yes, but she has to admit to faults in the past, even if they were just simple mistakes or, something changed my mind. You have to show the evolution. You can't just turn on a dime and not expect someone to ask for an explanation. This is her problem. If she's going to say that I've evolved my opinion on border policy or on economic policy or something, you have to cite, well, we tried this and it went wrong, right? Or we did this particular thing and we saw what the failings were, and I'm going to attempt to improve them. But she's pointedly said there have been no problems, yet she wants us to believe that she is a change candidate. You have to show us how you've changed. You have to articulate that to us. Asked about some of her shifting stances in a CNN interview in August, Harris said, "My values have not changed." See what I mean? In a statement, James Singer, a spokesperson for the Harris-Walz campaign, said, quote, "Throughout her entire career, Kamala Harris has fought to protect people and hold bad actors accountable. She took on predators, rapists, abusers, fraudsters, and gangs to get justice for the people, and she will continue to fight for justice and freedom as President of the United States. Kamala Harris, the new Elliot Ness." I guess. Asked about Harris's change on the death penalty, a Harris aide said that the, quote, "role of Attorney General is different from that of a district attorney," unquote, and added that Harris followed state law as AG. Yeah, that complaint seems to be a non-starter to me. Unless you can show that she somehow, bucked the law or something as AG for her own personal beliefs. She signed on to defend the laws of the state of California. And if the law says, if you hit this particular mark in the crime, you're worthy of the death penalty, then that's what she's bound to do. I would hold her harmless from that contradiction if she's bound by the laws that she is employed to enforce. So that doesn't seem like anywhere to go with that one. The long-standing problem of racial inequities in the criminal justice system is among the issues that prompted Harris to become a prosecutor in the first place. Interesting, given the proportion of particular demographics that she prosecuted. Quote, "I grew up knowing about the disparities, inequities, and unfairness in the criminal justice system," Harris said in a 2019 town hall hosted by MSNBC. Quote, "What I said to my family and friends is, look, if we're going to reform these systems, we should also be on the inside where the decisions are being made. That's why I chose to do the work that I did, and I am proud of the work that I did," unquote. Okay, and how did that work for you over the time that you were a prosecutor? As a prosecutor, Harris adopted what she called a, quote, "smart on crime," unquote, approach to law enforcement. It included the launch of a program that sought to steer nonviolent offenders toward job training and away from prison, and the release of statewide criminal justice data in an effort to enhance government accountability. Yeah, look at the demographic proportions of things, and because there's a disparity, thus there is an inequity that I'm here to save the state from? I don't know. I get wary about people releasing statistics that may be manipulative. One of Harris's boldest moves as district attorney was to launch a program aimed at preventing young people from ending up in jail or prison by making sure they stayed in school. Ah yes, the school-to-prison pipeline. Quote, "I believe a child going without an education is tantamount to a crime," unquote, she said in a speech at San Francisco's Commonwealth Club in 2010. Quote, "So I decided I was going to start prosecuting parents for truancy," unquote. Okay. Quote, "This was a little controversial in San Francisco," she said, laughing. I imagine cackling, but okay. Quote, "And frankly, my staff went bananas," unquote. Uh-huh. She wrote in an op-ed around that time that she had, quote, "prosecuted 20 parents of young children for truancy, and that the crime carried a potential sentence of up to a year in jail. Your kid has skipped school. Welcome to a year in jail." All right. She never put anyone in jail, Harris would later say. Okay, so what was the point of all the money spent on gearing up this program? But her program became the basis of a bill that made it a criminal misdemeanor for parents to let their kindergarten through 8th grade children miss 10% or more of class without valid excuses. Those convicted are punishable by a fine not exceeding $2,000 or by, quote, "imprisonment in a county jail for a period not exceeding 1 year. Harris testified about the issue to the state Senate. She said, quote, "Through the power of the prosecutor's office, we have an incredible carrot and stick. The carrot, of course, being to hopefully encourage good behaviors, and the stick outlining what will be punishment or severe consequences when those good behaviors are not followed," unquote. What's the carrot? There's no carrot there. There's just stick. The carrot has to be an enticing reward. You just described the stick twice. It's the stick and stick. But okay. After the bill passed in 2010, some district attorneys took action. Dozens of parents have since been arrested or even jailed by other prosecutors for allegedly allowing their children to miss too many classes, according to local government press releases. Among those arrested were Ayman Haddadin and his wife Alice, who live in Orange County, south of Los Angeles. Why are we talking about this? Okay, well, I guess my question will be, how is CNN going to bring this back around to her presidential aspirations? Okay, the couple was accused by local prosecutors in 2011 of allowing their middle school-age child to accumulate 12 unexcused absences in a school year, failing to respond to notices or attending a meeting about the issue and permitting absences in prior years. In a recent interview with CNN, Ayman Haddadin said his son had struggled with chronic allergies that were often exacerbated at school, so he racked up absences that he believes should have been excused. Quote, "If he can't breathe," he said of his son, "he can't function," unquote. Sounds like a George Floyd response. Even though his family had sought to discuss the issue with school administrators, Haddadin told CNN police showed up at his home just after dawn and took him and his wife, who was still in her pajamas, into custody. They were hauled off in handcuffs, he said, and details of their arrest were spotlighted in local media reports. The spectacle, he said, affected his whole family. Quote, "I remember being absolutely terrified," his now adult son, Connor Haddadin, who had accumulated the absences, said of his parents' arrests. Quote, "It was extremely wrong and traumatic." Ayman Haddadin said the case was ultimately dismissed. A spokesperson for the Orange County District Attorney's Office said the case against the Haddadins is sealed and declined for further comment. Okay, I honestly don't care about the truancy stuff. When do we get to what this has to do with her presidential campaign? Okay. Harris, who for years had advocated on behalf of prosecutors getting involved in truancy cases, has since expressed regret about the, quote, "unintended consequence," unquote, of parents being prosecuted and jailed, quote, "because that was never the intention," unquote. That was entirely the intention. If you set a penalty of potential jail time for truant children to the parents, that was the intention. But Alice Haddadin questioned those statements from Harris, as any thinking person should. Quote, "I don't think you can consider that an unintended consequence because she created the law," unquote, she told CNN. Yeah. As Attorney General of California, Harris has attained the ultimate position for changing the state's criminal justice system from within, as she had set out to do as a young lawyer. Well, yeah, I guess so. And she tried to deny her own involvement in the consequences of her actions. Boy, that actually rings true today, too, doesn't it? I mean, in saying that the Biden administration has so far done nothing wrong that she wouldn't have changed, or that she won't do different. Okay, maybe I'm now seeing the relevance of this. She was California's top cop and had a wide purview to set policy and right wrongs in the manner she saw fit. On the campaign trail as a presidential candidate, she routinely touts her record as California's top prosecutor, including the way she took on big banks that foreclosed on people's homes and prosecuted Mexican drug cartels and other transnational criminal organizations. And I know that there probably are specific cases, but she never gives us specific cases. Like, what big bank did she take on? And how did that work out? Which Mexican drug cartels did she take on? And how did that work out? I mean, doing something and achieving something are, two different things. But I never hear the specifics. She was also faulted by critics. Well, what else would critics be doing, CNN? But anyway, she was also faulted by critics, some of whom had once been her supporters, for not doing enough during her time as AG. In 2015, following the widespread civil unrest in the wake of the police killing of Brown in Ferguson. You mean the police officer is killing Brown in self-defense? But anyway, Missouri, the previous summer, Harris began requiring special agents working for the State Department of Justice to wear body cameras when on duty. You're just repeating yourself, CNN. You said this up top. Are we just going to go through? Let's see. Sorry, I'm just skimming now because at this point I'm just wondering where are we going to get to. Let's see. Here we go. As AG, Harris declined to support a 2015 bill by Democratic Assemblyman Kevin McCarthy from Sacramento that would have required the state to conduct such probes as opposed to county prosecutors who may appear biased due to their close working relationship with local police. Quote, the African American and civil rights community have been disappointed that Harris hasn't come out stronger on this, McCarty, a member of California's Legislative Black Caucus, told the Los Angeles Times in 2016. Aside from not backing the bill, Harris declined to investigate controversial fatal police shootings in Los Angeles, Anaheim, and her former hometown of San Francisco, in which local officials declined to file charges against officers. The suspects in Los Angeles and Anaheim were unarmed. The man killed in San Francisco had a knife. Well, unarmed does not mean not dangerous. Just so you know. There was this one video, and this is a few years ago now, where an unarmed man was having a domestic fight in his front yard with his family. The police pull up with their body cams, and this unarmed man, apparently just ignoring the police officer, if I remember correctly, grabbed a teenager or a child, one of the two, I believe it was a family member, and started choking that child. Headlock, trying to strangle this child. He was unarmed. The police shot him. Saved that kid's life, probably. I mean, he was unarmed, so obviously there was no reason for the police to shoot. Just remember, everyone, unarmed does not mean no threat. In the immediate aftermath of the shooting in Anaheim, the city's then mayor, Tom Tate, called on Harris to conduct an independent probe during a press conference in which scores of prosecutors packed the lobby of the Anaheim Police Department. Protesters, not prosecutors, pardon me. Quote, I believe we needed an independent outside investigation to get to the truth of what happened, Tate told CNN in September. I thought this would have helped provide credibility and public trust in our justice system. Unquote. Harris opted not to get involved, he said. McCarty told CNN, despite the disappointment he voiced in 2016, Harris later helped shape subsequent law mandating the Attorney General's involvement in investigating fatal police shootings of unarmed suspects. Okay, why? This doesn't help show that she's consistent. This just shows that she's waffling all the time. Quote, I applaud Kamala Harris for helping lay the foundation to make this a reality, he said. Years later, after being elected to the U.S. Senate and launching her first campaign for president, her first campaign for president, how did that go, by the way? Harris noted the importance of the sort of, quote, independent investigations, unquote, she had declined to provide as Attorney General. She did so in the wake of yet another high-profile police killing, one that would ignite a global movement, that of Floyd in Minneapolis in 2020. Speaking to colleagues on the Senate Judiciary Committee, Harris asked for their support in passing a new federal law, one that would help ensure independent oversight in cases in which local prosecutors have a perceived or real conflict of interest with investigating the officers in question. Quote, as a former prosecutor, she said, I know that independent investigations into police misconduct are imperative, unquote. Except when they're not. Until they are. And this article was all over the place. And what was the analysis of it? As Harris makes her case for presidency, her record as prosecutor draws fresh scrutiny. Okay, well, CNN, knowing what you know now after this analysis of her prosecutorial record, what implications does that have for a Harris presidency, or at least a Harris presidency when it comes to law enforcement? Anything? Anything at all? Anything that she's said since becoming vice president that might be on point to this, or might indicate something, or that she said on the campaign trail? Anything? Okay, I guess not. But all right. Tyr Alexander, I am always unarmed, and I am very more dangerous without a weapon. There is no weapon alive that cannot be overcome by a clever mind. A most dangerous game. Josh Hammond, good morning to you. Full Metal Joker, we need the deets. Yeah, well, I mean, I want to know from CNN what this has to do, or again, what this implies about her presidential campaign, or Kamala Harris as president. If she said this and done that, but done this and said that, okay, and how has she, responded to these things on the campaign trail? What has she said about law enforcement, or how she would conduct law enforcement on the campaign trail recently? Anything? Is there anything about her current policy proposals that have to do with law enforcement? I don't know. I'm asking CNN. Jim Helis, I always found the punishment for not having your kid in school seemed like forced indoctrination. I guess it depends on the school. But, I mean, I could see maybe not jail time, but, yeah, if you have unless you have established yourself as a homeschool situation or have some other issue, keeping your kid away from education is at least a warning sign. I'm not quite, I guess it depends on the circumstances. I'm not quite sure how you would prosecute that as a crime of the parent. But of course, if they're responsible for the child, yeah, I don't know. But anyway, so I was hoping for more from CNN on that one, but what am I thinking by saying that? So yes, Kamala Harris had a wishy-washy, timey-wimey kind of here nor there record on her values as prosecutor, except her values haven't changed, as she told us. But let's now go to MSNBC. The Atlantic via MSNBC or MSN.com. The case for Kamala Harris. Well, here we go. More prosecutorial language. For the third time in 8 years, Americans have to decide whether they want Donald Trump to be their president. That's true. No voter could be ignorant by now of who he is. That's also true, which is why I don't spend a whole lot of time talking about Donald Trump, because he is the devil we know, so to speak. Opinions about Trump aren't just hardened, they're dried out and exhausted. Really? You know, because a lot of the things I'm hearing in the last few weeks especially, you would think Donald Trump is the incumbent presidential candidate. But okay. The man's character has been in our faces for so long, blatant and unchanging, that it kills the possibility of new thoughts. It does? Okay, which explains the strange mix of boredom and dread in our politics. Whenever Trump senses any waning of public attention, he'll call his opponent a disgusting name, or dishonor the memory of fallen soldiers, or threaten to overturn the election if he loses, or vow to rule like a dictator if he wins. I have a feeling the Atlantic might be a bit hyperbolic here. Anyway, he knows that nothing he says is likely to change anyone's views. Maybe, or maybe he just doesn't care. Which, again, may or may not be rewarded by the electorate by the time the election happens. Because it's really, really close. Atlantic, I don't know if you know this, but Trump and Harris are, by statistical measures, neck and neck right now. That's not really a compliment towards either candidate based on the quality of either candidate, is it? Almost half of the electorate supported Trump in 2016 and supported him again in 2020. This same split seems likely on November 5th. Okay, Trump's support is fixed and impervious to argument. I doubt that. But at the same time, there's not a whole lot of options being offered, so this election, like the last two, will be decided by an absurdly small percentage of voters in a handful of states. Is this an argument against the Electoral College? Is this an argument against the Electoral College? Because one of the most personally malignant and politically dangerous candidates in American history was on the ballot. Personally malignant and politically dangerous. Yeah, look how the country came crashing down after Donald Trump's 4 years in office. Look, everyone. Look at how everything fell apart as a result of Donald Trump. Because one of the most personally malignant and politically dangerous candidates in American history was on the ballot, The Atlantic endorsed Trump's previous Democratic opponents. Would The Atlantic have done otherwise if the candidate had been anybody other than Trump but still a Republican? I have to wonder. Only the third and fourth endorsement since the magazine's founding in 1857. Oh, okay, so you were really politically neutral on this kind of thing, but really passionate against Trump. Huh. We endorsed Abraham Lincoln for president in 1860, though not for reasons lost to history in 1864. Okay. 104 years later, we endorsed Lyndon B. Johnson for president. You got any retroactive comments on that one? Okay. In 2016, we endorsed Hillary Clinton for more or less the same reason Johnson won this magazine's endorsement in 1964. Clinton was a credible candidate. Really? I don't know if credible is the word I would use. She was certainly a candidate who would have made a competent president. Maybe. But we endorsed her because she was running against a manifestly unstable and incompetent Republican nominee. Okay, so for all the reasons that would speak to her merit, not so much, but just because you really didn't like the Republican candidate. That's not actually a good look on you, if you think about it for a second. The editors of this magazine in 1964 feared Barry Goldwater less for his positions than for his zealotry and seeming lack of self-restraint. Again, damning with faint praise comes to mind. Of all Trump's insults, cruelties, abuses of power, corrupt dealings, and crimes, the event that proved the essential rightness of the endorsements of Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden took place on January 6, 2021, when Trump became the first American president to try to overturn an election and prevent the peaceful transfer of power. Did he? Okay, this year, Trump is even more vicious and erratic than in the past, and the ideas of his closest advisors are more extreme. Is that like 1990s kid extreme? Extreme. Trump has made clear that he would use a second term to consolidate unprecedented power in his own hands, punishing adversaries, and pursuing a far-right agenda that most Americans don't want. You mean, as opposed to Biden's campaign to consolidate unprecedented power into his own hands, punishing his adversaries and pursuing a far-left agenda that most Americans don't want? Don't get me wrong, you know, two wrongs don't make a right here, but do you have anything to say about what Biden's done over the last 3.5, 4 years? Anything? We believe that this election is a turning point in our history. The magazine prophesied correctly when it endorsed Abraham Lincoln in 1860. This year's election is another. You know what? Every election is a turning point in history. That is the most empty, overdramatic statement I hear every single cycle. Ever since I've been alive and I've paid attention to politics, this is one of the most important elections in our history. This is a turning point in American history. Every election is a turning point in American history. Hell, the moment I am sitting in right now, as it is passing as I record this, is a turning point in American history. Somewhere, somehow, something is happening that is shifting the course of American history by, even just a millimeter. Good gravy. About the candidate we are endorsing. Wait, are you endorsing a candidate or are you disparaging a candidate? Because it seems more like you're fueled by hating Trump rather than loving Kamala. But okay, about the candidate we are endorsing. The Atlantic is a heterodox place. Heterodox place. Oh, fancy. Staffed by free thinkers. Really? Is it staffed by any Trump enthusiasts by any chance? And if there were any, would they last long? Staffed by free thinkers. And for some of us, Kamala Harris's policy views are too centrist, while for others, they're too liberal. Uh-oh. Okay, so what exactly is influencing you to endorse her? The process that led to her nomination was flawed. What process? What process? There was no process. Biden dropped out. Everybody just kind of shrugged their shoulders. And she was the nominee. I mean, I guess you could call that a process. Okay, the process that led to her nomination was flawed. And she's been cagey in keeping the public and press from getting to know her as well as they should. Where is the case for... The title of this article was The Case for Kamala Harris. Okay, but we know a few things for sure. Do tell. Having devoted her life to public service... Harris respects the law and the Constitution. Oh, she does she? Okay. She believes in the freedom, equality, and dignity of all Americans. Okay, okay. Make the case. Give me examples. She's untainted by corruption. What? Let alone a felony record or history of sexual... No. You're making the case for Kamala Harris. You're not making a case against Donald Trump. Or are you? Which is it? She's untainted by corruption? Well, I guess it depends on how you define corruption. She doesn't embarrass her compatriots with her language and behavior. Well, I guess that could be true. She more embarrasses herself. The people who are around her and support her embarrass themselves by endorsing her. Kind of like the Atlantic right now. She doesn't embarrass her compatriots with her language and behavior or pit them against one another. Atlantic, I don't know if you know this, but there's this great article, an amazing article from CNN, back in, 2021. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take the link to this article, I'm going to put it in the chat. If you have not read this article, get a coffee, take some time. It's a long article, but it is totally worthwhile, and here's why. This is a breakdown, in so many words, of how Kamala Harris's vice presidential office operated in the opening months of her time as vice president. And keep in mind, this is a woman who thought she was ready to be the president of the United States. So when you read this article and all the insanity described therein, imagine all of that taking place behind closed doors of the Oval Office. Because if she had won, somehow, the presidency back in 2020, that's what it would have looked like. And in all honesty, I have not been shown anything to convince me that if she ends up in the Oval Office this time, it won't be a repeat. So seriously, read that article, share it with others. It is amazing. It's an amazing article, especially coming from CNN and especially as candid as it is. C. Thomas, peasant. Ahoy there, Mr. Scribbles. Good morning, C. Thomas. And also, Faithless, good morning to you. TC, good morning. Let's see, anybody else I want to say good morning to here before I continue? Anybody else that popped in? Did I say good morning to your ridiculous lunatic? Good morning, Luna. And hope everything with the local roads is better than it was yesterday. All right. She doesn't embarrass her compatriots with her language and behavior or pit them against each other. She doesn't curry favor with dictators. You know what? I talked about this after the debate. She's going to have to. I hate to inform people who want to become leaders of nations, but once in a while, you are going to have to play nice with people who lead countries who have values and systems that are diametrically opposed to your own, simply to get along. We are a far more interconnected world now than we were in the past, and once in a while, Kamala Harris, if she becomes president, is going to have to meet with Xi Jinping. She's going to have to meet with Saudi Arabian, kings and monarchs and so on. Occasionally, she's going to have to meet, if she's got any sense in her, with Vladimir Putin and a raft of other characters in this world who would, by all rights, be called dictators. Because that's what you have to do when you're moving nation to nation sometimes. You're going to have to play nice with people you don't like, because that's just the pragmatic nature of statecraft. I don't know why people look at this as something that's like a plus. It's going to happen. The first time she gets photographed with Xi Jinping, I don't know what to tell you, Atlantic. Or do you want Kamala Harris to be a total isolationist? I mean, maybe that's your position. I don't know. Yeah. I don't like the idea of having to play nice with people who run terrible countries with terrible policies and terrible human rights records. But at a certain level, I understand the necessity of it, even if I don't like it. She won't abuse the power of the highest office in order to keep it. Oh, so you're psychic now? Okay, she believes in democracy. Does she? Then why didn't she demand a primary? To prove her worth, to prove her ability, to uphold the position of nominee. Okay, these, and not any specific policy positions, are the reasons The Atlantic is endorsing her. Okay, so on the basis of predictions of a behavior yet to be seen, she's untainted by corruption. She doesn't embarrass her compatriots. She doesn't curry favor with dictators. Well, I'd be really curious to know how she and Biden are currently trying to negotiate a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, unless you don't see Hamas and its leaders as dictators over Gaza. I mean, maybe you don't. This endorsement will not be controversial to Trump's antagonists. You're correct, because all you're doing is painting yourself as simply a Trump antagonist. Nor will it matter to his supporters. True. But to the voters who don't much care for either candidate and who will decide the country's fate, it is not enough to list Harris's strengths. Well, you could at least try. Or write a bill of obvious particulars against Trump. I don't need you to write a bill of obvious particulars against Trump, which you've already spent half this article doing. Why don't you defend your decision to endorse Kamala Harris, like in specifics? The main reason for these ambivalent Americans to vote for Harris has little to do with policy or partisanship. Are you sure about that? You just criticized her for not making herself more well-known to the electorate. So, if there are people ambivalent about Harris, maybe one of the reasons is they don't know or understand her policies or her partisanship. So, it's this: electing her and defeating him is the only way to release us from the political nightmare in which we're trapped and bring us to the next phase of the American experiment. Atlantic, the political nightmare in which we're trapped is currently being presided over by Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. I don't know if you're aware of this fact. Again, it seems like The Atlantic believes Donald Trump is the incumbent president. Trump isn't solely responsible for this age of poisonous rhetoric, hateful name-calling, conspiracies and lies, divided families and communities, cowardly leaders and deluded followers. But as long as Trump still sits atop the Republican Party, it will not end. His power depends on lowering the country into a feverish state of fear and rage. Who's promoting fear here? Where Americans turn on one another. For the millions of alienated and politically homeless voters who despise what the country has become and believe it can do better, sending Trump into retirement is the necessary first step. Atlantic, do you believe that the Biden administration has been a net good for the country? Do you believe that Kamala Harris has presented herself as a reliable and trustworthy candidate for the presidency? If the answer to either of those questions is no, then concerns over Trump are not really the thing you should be focusing on in endorsing Kamala Harris. If you're a conservative who can't abide Harris's tax and immigration policies, well, I don't know if I can abide Harris's tax policies because I don't know what her plan is to actually institute them. But her immigration policies, you're darn tootin', I'm no happy with that. And I'm certainly not happy with the fact that only at the last minute did she decide, well, I guess by extension, Biden decide, to institute Trump-like restrictions on the border that he could have done at any point, but lied about his ability to do so. But who is also offended by the rottenness of the Republican Party, only Trump's final defeat like he's a boss monster, will allow your party to return to health. Then you'll be free to oppose President Harris wholeheartedly. Well, if I was a Republican, how am I not free to oppose her wholeheartedly right now? What? Like you, we wish for the return of the Republican Party of Ronald Reagan, Bob Dole, John McCain, and Mitt Romney. Oh yeah, John McCain and Mitt Romney. Boy, oh boy, were those guys ever inspiring? A party animated by actual ideas. We believe that American politics are healthiest when vibrant conservative and liberal parties fight it out on matters of policy. You know what, Atlantic? I do too. Could Kamala Harris come out and defend her policy plans? Could she tell us how she intends to enact any of these goals that she's listed? Could she come out and defend her policy position on the border? Not just right now, but over the last 3.5 years? If you're a progressive who thinks the Democratic Party is a tool of corporate America, well, that's not so much an opinion as it is a fact. Talk to someone who still can't forgive themselves for voting for Ralph Nader in 2000. I don't think most progressive Democratic Party members were alive to see that. But anyway, then ask yourself which candidate, Harris or Trump, would give you any leverage to push for policies you care about. And if you're one of the many Americans who can't stand politics and just want to opt out, well, it's not that I can't stand politics, it's that for these particular candidates, I'm not jazzed about either one. Remember that under democracy, inaction is also an action. Well, I'm going to vote in the state and local elections. As I choose. You know, if there's two candidates that I don't particularly like either, I might bow out of those too individually. But anyway, inaction is also an action. That no one ever has clean hands. Yeah. And that, as our 1860 editorial said, quote, nothing can absolve us from doing our best to look at all public questions as citizens, and therefore in some sort as administrators and rulers, unquote. In other words, voting is a right that makes you responsible. Okay. Trump is the Sphinx who stands in the way of America entering a more hopeful future. Trump is a Sphinx? In Greek mythology, the Sphinx killed every traveler who failed to answer her riddle, until Oedipus finally solved it, causing the monster's demise. The answer to Trump lies in every American's hands. Then he needs only to go away. Good gravy. Could you spend more words not endorsing Kamala Harris in an editorial titled "The Case for Kamala Harris"? Again, I know I sound like a broken record. Damning with faint praise. Hey guys, Kamala's kind of a disappointment, but Trump is gonna be terrible a second time after the first time, when he didn't do anything that we threatened that he would do, and the country did not disintegrate as a result. I keep wondering, and I think I've asked this before, how many on the left or in the Democratic Party were hoping for more January 6ths after January 6th, and yet we haven't had any. You know, because if the point where everything started falling apart is January 6th, you'd think we would have had more of those. But we haven't. Yet they put up the cages and the gates every time there was any kind of event in Washington, D.C., just expecting it. By hoping for it. We hope these fences and these gates and these walls will be needed to keep back the monstrous right-wing hordes that never showed up. But we did have a few, riots and things that burned down cities over leftist policies. Put that aside. John Miller, and here I thought the Sphinx was Egyptian. Well, I mean, Egypt and Greece and everything, they crossed over quite a bit. Rome, there was a lot of interpollination there, let's say. C. Thomas, I feel like this author just wanted to tell us they can write without having to say so. Well, it's like, well, it's really, it is something to listen to that or read that. And it falls in line with the pattern of so many articles I've been reading on Kamala Harris for the last 3 years. And again, I've been very, very curious and fascinated by the character of Kamala Harris and her place in our political process, given the age and infirmity of our president, since the beginning of this, effectively a playlist. This is the next entry in a playlist I've had going for 3 years now. Because time and time and time again, I read an article that is purportedly meant to be in support of Kamala Harris in her activities, either as vice president or now as a presidential candidate. And yet time and time again, I keep waiting for these people who are really excited to be on the side of Kamala Harris to give me concrete, substantive reasons to believe that she is capable of being president. And yet time and time and time again, those concrete reasons and arguments and examples are not forthcoming, and we just saw it there with The Atlantic in an editorial titled The Case for Kamala Harris. And when I hear that somebody has a case to be made for something, I expect evidence. I have this very sort of, criminal justice-minded sensibility about these things, especially when you're talking about a former prosecutor. So give me evidence, give me examples, show me the proof that she would be a good leader. Have we seen anything that exemplifies her leadership other than waffling? Anyway, let's move on to our next. Again, these are just published within the last few days of each other. Like within the last 72 hours, these articles have come out. Now, this is from Time Magazine. Okay, I believe this just came out yesterday. It's a 17-minute read. Oh man, I don't know if I can do that. But we'll see. This is from Time Magazine. What kind of president would Kamala Harris be? This article should have come out back in July, when Biden dropped out of the race. But here we are, just weeks away from the election. And this is when Time is asking this. This came out on October 10th, pardon me. I thought it was more recent than that. Okay. On a sunny Wednesday in late September, Vice President Kamala Harris took the stage at Carnegie Mellon University for the first comprehensive economic policy speech of her short presidential campaign. Addressing a sedate audience in suits and ties, the vice president outlined plans to strengthen small businesses, cut taxes on the middle class, and build more affordable housing. Outline plans? I really have to ask, this has come out again and again, a goal is not a plan. So did she actually outline a plan, or did she just list goals? Quote, "I am a capitalist," she told the Pittsburgh crowd, detailing how she would invest in startups and increase public-private partnerships, and describing an approach to economic growth that stressed stability. Please give me the details. No? Okay. It was a business-friendly speech tailored to business-friendly voters. But in a neck-and-neck presidential race, wonky pitches like these, could make the difference. Maybe. In a September New York Times Siena poll, nearly 30% of likely voters said they felt they needed to learn more about the vice president before making their choice. And isn't that just a sign of the absolute failure of the Biden administration, both in the previous election and in the last 3.5 years? That people are still just, who the heck is this lady? It's not that she was kept in the background for the better part of the last 3 years because she was such an embarrassment. But anyway, the fight to define Kamala Harris, who she is, what she stands for, and what kind of president she would be, will be one of the central battles of the campaign's final weeks. Will be one of the central battles? It should have been the entire focus of the last 2 months. Will be... Okay, to examine these questions, Time spoke with 20 current and former Harris campaign advisors, former aides in her vice presidential and Senate offices, senior officials from each of the past 5 presidential administrations, and a range of policy experts. If only she could articulate to us herself what kind of president she would be. Instead, time has to go off to scores of other people to try to decipher this. The Atlantic talked about the riddle of the Sphinx. I think we know what our riddle of the Sphinx is this time around. It's not Donald Trump. Donald Trump is a known quantity. The riddle to be solved here, the Gordian knot to be untied, is who the heck is Kamala Harris? What does she believe and what will she do as president? And we're only now asking these questions less than a month away from the election. The portrait that emerged was of a politician, is she, who is more practical than ideological. I suppose so. She does not have any set ideology. She just goes whichever way the winds blow her. Or vice versa. A cautious candidate running in a change election. A change election? Oh, God. Juggling the liabilities and benefits of her ties to her boss, President Joe Biden. Yes, thank you, Time. I knew who her boss was. As well as her own past positions, all while trying to keep the focus on her opponent. For Harris, policy specifics are in service to the larger goal of her campaign, which is to present a credible alternative to a second Donald Trump presidency. Policy specifics are in... What specifics? At Carnegie Mellon, Harris offered the most detailed look at her economic plans. Again, let's see if we go from goals to actual plans. Her economic plan since taking over as the Democratic nominee. She's proposing a $50,000 tax deduction to help Americans start more small businesses and a $6,000 child tax credit for families in the first year of a baby's life. Okay, those are goals. How does she intend to achieve them? Where is she going to get the money? And how is she going to convince Congress to go along with this goal? Or the plan that she has to achieve it. These are the two things she has to explain for each one of these. And as far as I know, to this point, I have yet to hear any specific plans of how she means to achieve these things. She plans to extend $35 insulin to all Americans and eliminate degree requirements for 500,000 federal jobs. Eliminate degree requirements? Wait. So you're going... She intends to lower the educational bar for federal jobs. 500,000 federal jobs will have a lower standard of education requirement. Okay. She wants to invest in research and development in new manufacturing industries and trim red tape to further the Biden administration's overhaul of America's infrastructure. How? In what way? Perhaps more than any other presidential candidate in recent memory, Harris has focused on solving America's housing crisis. I thought that she was assigned the border. She plans... Okay, every time I see this, she plans, it should just be her goal is. Her goal is. Not she plans. I don't see any plans here. Her goal is to offer $25,000 in down payment assistance to first-time home buyers, a tax credit to incentivize builders, and pledges to build 3 million affordable housing units in her first term. She is going to build 3 million affordable houses, or housing units, could be dingy apartments, in 4 years? 3 million in 4 years. How? You can imagine, I can imagine quite a bit. You can imagine the Harris presidency as an iOS upgrade of the current administration. You mean the current administration to which she has been part and parcel the whole time? An upgrade? She's been there the whole... Why hasn't any of this happened in the last 3.5 years? The operating system would stay the same, but with new features and better packaging. Time. You might have just defeated the Atlantic for very creative ways of damning with faint praise. There are tonal differences between the two. Harris talks more and more comfortably about abortion rights than Biden ever did. Okay, well, the abortion rights debate has gone to the states. So, unless Kamala Harris, and I've asked for this any number of times on streams talking about Kamala Harris, if Kamala Harris wants to show us her leadership skill in going state to state and trying to argue in those states that are either, I don't know, on the fence about or completely against abortion rights, if she wants to show how she's playing politics and twisting arms and making the case and so on, whether she wins those arguments or not, I'm all for it. Show me her leadership acumen in arguing for abortion rights in places that aren't jazzed about them. At least that would give me some idea of her leadership abilities, and her connectiveness to the political class, as it were. I still haven't seen that. But she can talk about it. I mean, heck, I can talk about DC Comics. I don't know a heck of a lot about them, but I can talk about them, and comfortably, within the boundaries of my knowledge. Does that say anything about my ability to change the state of DC Comics? No. But Time wants us to know Harris talks more and more comfortably about abortion rights than Biden ever did, speaks with more empathy about the suffering of Palestinian civilians in Gaza, and has put housing and small business at the center of her plans, her goals for strengthening the middle class. But for the most part, allies and critics agree that there is little evident policy daylight between the Democratic nominee and the president she replaced atop the party's ticket this summer. So really, everything you just said in the paragraph above is meaningless. Okay, so how is she a change candidate again? The sharper contrast is between Harris's current positions and her previous ones. The waffler, you mean? If you talk to Harris's advisors, the word that frequently comes up is pragmatic. No, I think I'd say opportunistic. But the candidate who campaigned for president in the 2020 Democratic primary was part of the party's leftward lurch. Back then, Harris supported a public health care option and a Green New Deal. Does she still support those things? She wanted to ban fracking, decriminalize unauthorized border crossings, and cut funding for immigrant detention. Well, she got her wish there, didn't she? She backed forcing owners of assault weapons to sell them to the government. She has since changed her stance on all of these issues. So she really stands for nothing, and is willing to change her opinion on the turn of a dime. And apparently not for any explicable reasons other than it's the most attractive option at the moment. One of the previous articles talked about her evolving on certain issues. Well, I have to see the steps in the evolution, not just a heel turn. Some voters see these shifts as part of a predictable pivot to the center. Others see them as flip-flops in need of an explanation. Well, I'd be one of those. If you want me to think of her as a thoughtful candidate, I have to understand her thoughts that bridge the gap between opinion A and opinion B. But she seems completely reticent in telling us anything about those. Outside the auditorium at Carnegie Mellon, Rodrigo Lopez, a registered independent from Florida, was finishing up homework for his mechanical engineering class. Lopez followed the 2020 primary closely and recalled that Harris took left-wing positions he disliked. He said he would never vote for Trump, but doesn't feel he knows enough about Harris to cast a ballot for her either. Quote, "It's hard to tell what her real policy intentions are," he says. Harris, quote, "could win my vote," Lopez adds, quote, "if she articulates the reason she's changed some of her stances." Exactly. Show me how you evolved. Show me what changed your mind. What moved you from one point to another? Let me try to understand your way of thinking on these issues. Please. People are asking you, Kamala. Explain yourself. And yet, here we are. Harris is hardly the first presidential candidate to change her positions. Well, that's a non-starter right there. And so what? So now you're making... So rather than demanding that she explain her positions, you're just going to say, oh, well, other people change their positions all the time. I'm going to skip that paragraph. Harris is running on what she won't do as much as she would. She won't curb abortion rights, as Republicans want to. She won't impose Trump's blanket tariffs, which most economists believe would raise prices and could throw the country into a recession. Hers are more narrowly targeted. Oh, so she does want to do tariffs. Okay. She won't initiate the mass deportation of undocumented immigrants, as Trump promises, or fire legions of civil servants and replace them with MAGA loyalists. She won't attempt to overturn the result of a free and fair election, as Trump did. Well, we'll wait and see on that one, won't we? Once upon a time... Okay, but here's the thing. This is the problem. I don't want to hear what she won't do. I want to know what she's going to do to improve my life. Okay? I'm going to be very selfish here. Very, very selfish. At the end of the day, I want to know that our country is secure, that our economy is going to improve, and that my personal well-being is going to raise from where it is after a Joe Biden administration to a better place. Now, who do I believe can do that? From past evidence. Okay, under Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, what little personal wealth I possess, which isn't much, dropped through the frickin' floor. It went back to the same numbers I had back when Obama was president. And inflation has gone up, so in fact, I have less now than I did under Obama in what meager investments I have. Under Trump, do you know what happened to those investments? They shot through the roof. I was as happy as a pig in poo. Because I was like, oh my God, all this money I've been sacking away during the course of my quasi-professional life, it didn't pay off under Obama, but all of a sudden it's starting to pay off. And then it all disappeared. 6 months into a Biden administration, it all disappeared. And it hasn't really recovered. And even if it had, again, what recovery it's had, it means even less because inflation is so high that the amount for the dollar that I used to have isn't a dollar anymore. Oh, also, Midnight's Edge is in the chat. Hey, Midnight's Edge. Now see, because of the ambiguity of that identity, I don't know if it's Tom Connors or Andre. Could be either. Either way, I'd be flattered. Okay, once upon a time, presidential candidates compared health care plans or tax policies when competing for votes. Yeah, remember those days? Hey, Kamala, why don't you, harken back to the old days and give us your entire plan? Not just your goals, your entire plan. These days, a policy-heavy campaign can weigh you down. I don't know if you were listening to your example voter earlier, Mr. Lopez. It's hard to tell what her real policy intentions are if she could win my vote if she articulates the reason she's changed some of her stances. Okay, Time Magazine, you say one thing and then you tell us another. Are you going to believe the voters you are talking to? We want to understand what her policy plans are and how she got from point A to point B on her positions. These days, a policy-heavy campaign can weigh you down. Elizabeth Warren's I Have a Plan for That campaign sputtered through the 2020 primary, failing to win a single state. That's because Elizabeth Warren has the personality of a desiccated moth corpse. I don't know what to tell you. There's got to be some more ingredients than just policy. And she didn't have any credibility to begin with. Anyway, she lost the nomination to Biden, whose campaign was about restoring the soul of the nation. Whatever that was supposed to mean. Oh, you mean you think it had no meaning to anyone? You think the previous 4 years of hearing nothing but Trump is literally the next leader of the German nationalists of the 1930s? That wasn't behind that? Whatever that was supposed to mean. That's not a quote from somebody. That's Time magazine talking. Okay, airy promises of hope and change worked for Barack Obama, whereas Hillary Clinton's economic white papers did not. Well, of course, her motto was, I'm with her, whatever the heck that meant. Trump's own campaign is constructed around a set of one-liners. He acknowledged in his recent debate with Harris that he only had concepts of a plan for overhauling the American healthcare system. None of that has cost him an iota of support. Instead of policy, many voters are making their decisions based on tribal allegiance or vibes. How is that any different from the Democrats? Okay, well, in contrast to Trump saying he has concepts of a plan, where are Kamala's plans? And do not confuse goals with plans, as you seem to want to. Which is one reason Harris's approach may be a winning strategy. What is her approach? What? For many, the fact that she is not Trump is reason enough to vote for her. Well, that was Biden's entire campaign too, wasn't it? So yes, it is a winning strategy. This is why I'm not convinced Kamala won't win. This is why I'm still very much concerned that she may win the presidency. Is because she's not Trump, and for a lot of people, apparently, that's enough, including The Atlantic. Running against MAGA has boosted Democrats to victory in scores of elections since 2016, whether those candidates had well-defined policies or not. I know. This is why I'm concerned. Quote, she knows that very few people are going to choose between her and Donald Trump based on some details of economic strategy or some full-fledged proposal, so she's not presenting them. Why bother presenting myself as a better, more prepared, more professional candidate? I'm not Trump. This is not the attitude I want in a president. This is not the attitude I want in someone running our country. I don't have to try too hard because my opponent is so bad and most people are going to vote for me regardless. This is where we're at. This is where we are at. Says David Wessel, Director of Fiscal and Monetary Policy at the Brookings Institution, a nonpartisan think tank. Quote, it's a strategy to win the election. What reason is there to put out a detailed economic plan if your opponent is just throwing snowballs? I would hope, because ultimately you're not there to compare yourself to your opponent, but to present yourself as the best candidate as you would want to see. I don't have to try too hard because the other guy's terrible and people are going to vote for me anyway, is not the attitude I want in my leader, or any leader. Depending on default. That's Kamala's strategy according to Time here. Depending on default. Okay, I'm not going to read the rest of this. This is going to take forever. There's a link in the description. I'll put a link to it also in the chat for reference. And I think that's where I'm going to wrap things up. That's depressing. That's really depressing. Here's the thing, and I'll say it until the end of time. Whether I vote in an election or not, whether my candidate of choice wins or not, I take the John Wayne position on it. I didn't vote for them, but they're my president, and I hope they do a good job. I don't want my president to be a failure. I don't want my president to be incompetent. I don't want my president to depend on default for winning. I want my president to have fought for my vote and made an argument that I can at least respect, if not agree with. But apparently, I'm not Trump is enough for Kamala Harris. and not describing her policy positions or how she's changed her opinion on things. If she could come before the American people and say, I used to say this about the border, but now I say this, and let me tell you why. My experiences as vice president has taught me blah, 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 blah. I used to think that an open border policy was the moral and correct thing to do. But since I've been vice president, I've witnessed this, and this, and I understand now that we need to find a different way. Again, depending on how she laid it out, I might respect that. I might even agree with it. But why bother? I'm not Trump. Why get into the nitty-gritty? Why risk bumbling over my own words as I do every other time I'm asked a direct question? I'm just not Trump, obviously. Also in the chat, Latino Slant, or Polly. Good morning, Polly. First cup of cafe? Hola. Yes, I'll be appearing tonight on Latino Slant at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern, as we discuss a multitude of things. I've been given quite the bit of homework from Polly. I think it's the most homework I've ever been provided ahead of an appearance on a live stream. And I've done it. Now, will I succeed in being a viable addition to his conversation? I don't know. I hope so. I guess we'll find out tonight on Latino Slant, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern. But as my voice starts to fail me, and on the possibility that I might be on other live streams this morning, I better get myself ready. Everyone, thank you so much for joining me. Let me know what you thought about this, these articles, these situations, what our presidential election is looking like in the comments below if I didn't get to your comment in the chat. Also, leave a like on the way out if you would. I'd appreciate that. Also, do you know I have a Discord server? Well, heck, I have a Discord server. Did you know I didn't prepare a link for the Discord server before I started the stream? You'd be absolutely right if you thought that, because I didn't. But fortunately, I just did. And now, there's a link to the Discord server in the chat. If you'd like to join the Discord server, all you have to do is click on that link. You'll find yourself on the landing channel called Say Hello. And in addition to saying hello, you just have to say the secret word. The secret word will tell me that you actually watched the stream, are not a bot, and have thus earned the right, the privilege, the entitlement to join the Discord server. And today's secret word is default. Just say, hello, default, and I'll know that you watched the show. Aside from that, everyone, thank you so much for joining me. Moderators, thank you for keeping an eye on things, even though everyone here is so well behaved. You have very, very little to do. Everybody who donated, thank you so much for your generosity. Very much appreciate it. Elsewise, everyone, looking forward to seeing you on Latino Slant tonight. And, of course, Thursdays, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern for TED Excellence. Everyone, have a good rest of your Monday and week ahead of you. Hope you're all safe and well. If you're not well, please get well soon. And I'll see you on the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.